Harvard created the Unabomber.
Participate in a psychological study on your university campus. It's run by an esteemed professor. You'll earn some pocket change, and as a side bonus, perhaps contribute to the greater scientific knowledge of humanity. But the next thing you know, you have electrodes strapping you to machines and a camera recording you.
Like, I think he was already a weirdo, and this just basically tweaked his mind in all the right ways. Like, you know how the FBI will, like, purposely find, like, random fucking teenagers and shit and, like, tell them all the best ways to, like, coerce them into doing an act of terror only to just, like, arrest them subsequently, put them in perma-jail to say, hey, we did it again, boys. We caught another terrorist in the act.
As a lawyer berates and belittles every belief and value you hold dear. Today, on Nutty History, we're putting a magnifying glass on the Harvard experiments, the mysterious and unethical series of experiments conducted on unwitting students from 1959 to 1962. The year was 1959. The setting was Harvard Yard. I'm sorry, I had to do an accent once. 22 Harvard students were asked, or possibly pressured, to participate in a vague series of psychological experiments that would contribute to the solution of certain psychological problems. You don't have to be a Harvard grad to know that that description is kind of sketchy. The subjects were paid for their time, typically 2 hours a week. For step one of the experiment, they were instructed to write an essay about their life philosophy and were told that they would be debating it with another student. Instead, they were straight up duped. These human guinea pigs were led into a brightly lit room, seated facing a one-way mirror. Through a hole in the wall, a camera was recording everything. Electrodes were attached to their bodies to measure their heart and respiratory rates. The students were then instructed to defend their personal life philosophy. But instead of being met with the promised discussion with a peer, they were interrogated by a lawyer.
I'm not gonna lie. This would break any man. This would break any fucking man. You don't even need to be like kind of a weirdo to be absolutely brain broken. He got literally debate lorded, dude. He got debate lorded into terrorism, which of course, once again, proves the point I make regularly, which is debate perverts are the biggest burden on society. It's not the Industrial Revolutions and its consequences on mankind. It's debate pervertry and its consequences on mankind.
An older and more experienced opponent whose aim was to humiliate and completely desecrate all of the students' most core beliefs. The interrogator prepared for each student by studying their essays, learning about their hopes and dreams with the aim of causing them to question everything they thought that they knew. The subjected students, who were given code names, described their helplessness during the experience as the verbal abuse continued. While 2 hours might not seem like the end of the world, over the course of 3 years, each student spent an average of 200 hours in a chair, which one student, codenamed Kringle, compared to being strapped into an electric chair. After interrogation, students were forced to watch themselves be berated, reliving the embarrassing ordeal all over again. So what the hell was the point of all of this? And who gave the okay on psychologically traumatizing the school's own students for 3 years? The Harvard experiments were led by Henry Murray, a respected psychology professor whose contributions to the field can still be found in modern-day psychological assessments. Like many of the greats, though, Murray's career wasn't squeaky clean, ethically speaking. By his own words, Murray called the interrogative attacks on the Harvard experiments vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive. So it certainly wasn't a case of good intentions gone wrong. The goals of these experiments weren't and aren't entirely.
That's a really good point. This is basically what Steven Crowder does on a regular basis. The Change My Mind segments. And Ben Shapiro does this too. Ben Shapiro is literally a lawyer. Ben Shapiro looked at how the Unabomber was created and was like, hypothetically, what if I was the one who did the exact same thing to unsuspecting college freshmen?
Entirely known, and it seemed Murray often deviated from an exact scientific method. One of his graduate students' assistants described him as not the most systemic scientist, and the professor himself often gave varying answers, at times suggesting his data had no value at all. Cool. Well, that's a good reason to emotionally scar a bunch of developing minds. There's other experience from Murray's background, however, that suggests he wasn't conducting these experiments just for kicks. In World War II, he was part of an Office of Strategic Services, later known as the CIA.
OSS guy, huh? Surely this had nothing to do with MK Ultra.
Where he helped assess agents and collaborated on a psychological profile of Hitler. The profile report specifically mentioned that Hitler would commit suicide if defeat was near. How about them apples? He also monitored military experiments on brainwashing. Get your tinfoil hats ready. A popular theory is that Murray's ties with the CIA continued post-World War II and into the Cold War. During this time, the CIA was focused on interrogation training and techniques, how to ensure their own men would stand up to interrogation, and how to effectively break enemy prisoners. This involved tests and experiments designed to psychologically break down the subject. Sound familiar? Much of this testing was encompassed under the notorious Project MK Ultra, which would use many—
Why is he saying, get your tinfoil hats ready, and then like talking about declassified information that is like, I don't know, just openly discussed? It's not like it's hidden. It's just like factual history.
Unknowing participants to test the use of drugs and procedures in interrogations for potential mind control. Some allege that the Harvard experiments were actually part of MK Ultra, which did utilize a variety of other institutions to secretly conduct its operations. Also adding fuel to the fire, MK Ultra drugged many of its subjects with LSD without their consent, for your information, thinking that bad acid trips were the key to controlling someone's mind. Henry Murray, funnily enough, also had an interest in psychedelics. Right around the same time period, he supervised and supported a young Harvard researcher by the name of Timothy Leary in a study of hallucinogens. According to our data, that's one coincidence too many. It's impossible to tell what lasting impact the Harvard experiments may have had on its subjects, but one went on to make history in a way that didn't exactly earn himself a spot in the Alumni Hall of Fame. Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber, terrorized the nation with a bombing campaign.
Okay, for the record, as far as Harvard alumni goes, Ted Kaczynski doesn't crack the top 100 most murderous alumni, okay? Like, you got presidents. You got, like, Secretary of States that have gone to Harvard. Get the fuck out of here. Motherfucker killed, like, 3 people and maimed, like, 16, okay? Those are actual rookie numbers for Harvard. I'm willing to bet that it does not even fucking crack the top 1,000, I would say. As far as, like, Harvard's most prestigious alumni, oh, my Lord.
Campaign for 17 years that killed 3 people and injured 23 more. Kaczynski at the time was living as a recluse in a cabin in the woods and used the bombs as a twisted way to draw attention to his anti-technology beliefs, which aren't actually so crazy compared to the methods he used to advertise them. But before the rap sheet, Ted was a young Harvard student, enrolling in the Ivy League school on a scholarship at just 16 years old. Kaczynski was a mathematical whiz who was also unlucky enough to be, according to him, pressured.
Yeah, Zuckerberg didn't even graduate Harvard, and he still got a fucking genocide in Myanmar under his belt that he, like, you know, played a formative role in facilitation.
Into partaking in Murray's experiments. Many believe that Murray's humiliating and traumatic experience, which Kaczynski called the worst experience of his life, were instrumental in shaping Ted into a very talented serial killer. As a younger and less mature student, he may have been more susceptible to manipulation and taken a harder hit, psychologically speaking. Others theorize that the ordeal made him increasingly isolated from Harvard society and led to a hatred of technology and psychology that later turned murderous. Prior to undergoing the Harvard experiments, Ted was described by a Harvard health scientist doctor as exceedingly stable. Well, here's some crows you can eat, doc. Although the methods of Murray's Harvard experiments seem stunningly unethical by today's standards, at the time they didn't really go against any research code of conduct. It wasn't until a whole bunch of other disturbing experiments occurred that the American Psychological Association instituted in-depth guidelines on research ethics and a review board. You know, disturbing experiments like the one where participants were made to believe that they had fatally electrocuted other participants. But
I feel like they could have done a deeper dive into the CIA MK Ultra stuff. A young Harvard student took part in an experiment that turned the participants into wet pieces of bread doomed to defend billionaires till they die from a fatally gay Bud Light commercial. That student's name, Ben Shapiro. Please pray for him.
Andrew, I mean, this is bringing up a whole lot of memories about, how Ted Kaczynski actually ended up, in custody. I mean, it was a great mystery for a very long time who was responsible for these, homemade bombs, these explosions, which were deadly explosions. And then ultimately, how investigators were able to piece it together. I mean, it really was an extraordinary mystery.
It really was. It's one of those cases that will go down in the history of the FBI as one of the most challenging and arduous investigations we mounted, but ultimately successful in 1995. We learned, of course, once we'd located Mr. Kaczynski and taken him into custody and saw the primitive conditions under which he was living, that's what made it so hard to really develop any effective leads for all those years. He was so completely off the grid, really leaving no trace of himself in any of the traditional ways that people do. But fortunately, with the publication of his manifesto, we were able to develop the sort of information from the public and specifically from family members that helped us crack the case.
And let's try and unravel some of that, because he was living in a cabin. I mean, it was, he wanted to be off the grid. That was his ambition. But at least one of the bombings took place as early as in the 70s at a Chicago university. And then you also, and it was a great mystery who was responsible for all of this. He was off the grid in a cabin, but perhaps his abduction, or his arrest it was self-inflicted. I mean, he authored this manifesto. He sent it right to the FBI. Perhaps he thought he would continue to be mysterious, but then they were able to piece together any relations and use this as evidence, publish it. And it was his brother who ultimately would help turn him in, right?
That's absolutely right. So Kaczynski started in the late 1970s with what began as a primitive, low-tech mail bombing campaign directed predominantly at universities and airline industry representatives and different airline-related targets. Of course, in '79 was able to get a bomb on an American Airlines flight that fortunately did not detonate, but it let off a great degree of smoke, which alerted the pilots and were able to effect an emergency landing. There's no doubt that had that bomb gone off, it would have taken the plane down and taken all those lives with it. So an incredibly focused, determined, resilient adversary, right? And somebody who was motivated primarily by his extremist positions with respect to the environment. People today, we think about domestic terrorism, we typically think about
Yeah, totally. That's why.
it in very different contexts. In the 80s and 1990s, environmental terrorism was a major program that was being worked by the FBI because we had extremist activity around
Dude, come on, dude. Come on. Painting him as an eco-terrorist, like 90% of the fucking people that the FBI, 90% of the people that the FBI fucking arrests as like eco-terrorists are like 65-year-old old school hippies who didn't actually fucking turn reactionary and would like strap themselves to fucking nuclear sites. Okay? Like the idea that these guys were working on eco-terrorists and that's why they were working on Ted Kaczynski is fucking hilarious. That is, oh my God, dude. Portraying him like an eco-terrorist is so fucking stupid. His targets were quite literally like random fucking college professors. What the fuck are we talking about? It's a gross way to portray people like actual anarchist activists and people who are legitimately and understandably protesting the initiatives of massive corporations that are ruining the environment for profit, in the same vein as like a guy who was a psychotic reactionary who was just sending fucking mail bombs to like PhDs. And that he was an eco-fascist. Exactly. But a fascist is the main thing he was. the idea that he was an eco-fascist and therefore he was an eco-terrorist in the same vein as, like, you know, literal Greenpeace people is so stupid. He's doing it deliberately because he's a fucking cop. If they were to offer you the actual types of people that they arrest for quote-unquote crimes against, like, pipelines and shit, you would see a very different portrayal. This motherfucker blew up 0 pipelines, okay? This motherfucker killed 0 oil and gas executives. Get the fuck out. He didn't even attempt to do that. He didn't try to do any of that. That's so stupid.
People who objected to environmental development, and Kaczynski was really kind of at the forefront of those thoughts. Not that he was a member of a group, but at the forefront of that ideology, and he pursued this bombing campaign as a way of striking back against technological advancement, which he believed was damaging the environment in ways that needed to be stopped.
Are you able to share with us some of the concerns that the FBI, that the Attorney General at the time, Janet Reno, had about whether they share this manifesto with the public, whether it would be used as an instrument, to further or agitate, threats against the U.S., domestic terrorism, and at the same time, what they were contemplating as to how it could ultimately be a tool to help capture the Unabomber?
Sure, I'm aware of those deliberations and those concerns only from the same way that, you and your viewers are, from understanding the history of it. I actually came into the Bureau in 1996, so it was right as the case was kind of coming to its close. Nevertheless, having been in many high-level meetings with attorneys general and FBI directors around these things, I can only imagine the way that each possible impact of the causes of action that they were considering.
Ted focused on educators who he saw as furthering industrial civilization through education. Come on, dude. I think he was just fucking unhinged. I mean, the court found him to be mentally ill. And yes, I think he was mentally ill. His ideology was all over the fucking place. We just covered it for the past, 2-3 hours. It was just saying some random shit. He was an unhinged, random psychopath. Tried to put together a cohesive ideology. Look into who the victims were. Chatter isn't wrong. Yeah, I think in order to take down industrial society, what you got to do is blow up a guy at Best Buy. What you got to do is blow up some fucking random PhD student, or whichever fucking college professor is dumb enough to pick up a parcel from the ground. That's how you're supposed to do it. Who are the real villains of society? Fucking college professors. Any supposed quote unquote leftist in this fucking community of all communities that unironically believes that fucking college professors have a fraction of power. And I don't mean college professors turned lobbyists, turned fucking guys who work in the Obama or Trump administration. I'm talking just straight up college professors who are still at college. You think those guys have any fucking power? How are you any different than the regular old Fox News watching 45-year-old divorced dad, HVAC business owner, reactionary, who unironically channels that exact same conspiracy through their lives every fucking day? They take it one step further. They also say, who holds all the power? Trans students. You know what I mean? Doing it wrong equals not true. Got it? I mean, where is the consistent, coherent narrative throughout, what he is even stating? There is none. His targets don't make sense. There is no clear-cut, cohesive narrative in his ideology. ultimately, if it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, then it's like, and he's like objectively insane. At a certain point, you have to realize, why the fuck am I trying so desperately to look at a dude whose manifesto was supposed to open up the eyes of millions of people, and it didn't at the time, and now you're looking at it, many, many years later, okay, and his inherently contradictory ideology is somehow, I don't know, makes sense to you. That says more about you than him, to be honest. Like, I have also participated in the Industrial Revolution and its consequences memes, right? I've done that too. I've shown my fair share of, like, I don't know, oil tankers sinking and, nuclear power plants falling apart. I've shown you this many times. But, like, it's memes. You're not supposed to take this seriously. Like, you're not supposed to look at this and go, you're not supposed to look at this and have an afterthought that is anything beyond, haha, that's funny. I know you can't legally send hate, but tell me who to camp with my American rights, bruh. What? But he did the wrong thing to solve the right problems? No, the problems were not even the right problems. He didn't address the right problems. You're wrong about that too. Like, no, he did the wrong thing and his analysis was wrong. There were, like, right parts about it for sure. But, it's kind of like looking at Jordan Peterson and being like, well, that's a guy who told me to clean my room. Why are you so upset at that? It's like looking at Andrew Tate and saying, well, that's a guy who's telling me I have the tools to success and that I should just go work out. Why are you getting mad? Okay? Like, the problems exist. Okay? He has a solution. It's the wrong solution. His analysis is also wrong overall. Like, unless you think the most significant problem in society is how collectivist we are, I don't think you agree with Ted Kaczynski's analysis. You looked at a capitalist dystopia and you thought it's not those who are fucking generating, who are sucking value out of the international working class, but instead it's the existence of the iPhone that's at fault. It's like looking at global capitalism, okay, and then getting mad at the iPhone's existence, and then killing someone that works at a fucking Apple bar, like killing a genius that works at an Apple bar to solve the problem with industrial society. Okay? That's crazy. No one should look at that and go, wow, that guy made a lot of sense. It's the W murder chatters. Like, when I shit on industrial revolution or industrial society, I'm mostly joking. I love technology. I'm a Twitch streamer. You know what I mean? I would not exist. My job, my career, okay, would not be real without technological innovation. I also am a big time advocate for taking a shower. Okay? So that's 2 L's for Ted. So, not a big fan of his ideas and what he represents beyond just like memeing about how certain externalities caused by the Industrial Revolution do bother me. Okay?
Considering was micro-analyzed to understand, are we making this issue worse if we give this person a platform, if we allow him to put his ideology out there, if it has an inspirational effect on other like-minded people, we could actually essentially be doing his job for him. On the other hand, and as I understand, Attorney General Janet Reno argued pretty strenuously that this was our best shot of kind of shaking the tree, as it were, to try to identify the author of the manifesto. And that, to her credit, is exactly how it worked out. Kaczynski's brother and his wife became aware of the manifesto. They had suspicions about Kaczynski before the manifesto, but it was the manifesto that really put Kaczynski's brother over the threshold and motivated him to contact the FBI and say that he thought he knew who the author was.
What more, if anything, can you tell us about kind of the evolution of this criminal profiling that was kind of born at this time?
So that's become a mainstay of the FBI. As you know, it's frequently captured in lore about the Bureau and movies and TV series, things like that. But it's become one of the most relied upon assets in these particularly hard cases, cold cases, bombing campaign like this one, multiple homicide cases that you believe are linked to the same perpetrator, when investigators have really expended their well of effective leads based on forensics and crime scene evidence and things like that, they often turn to the behavioral scientists, the folks at what we call BAU, the Behavioral Sciences Unit, to try to assist in guiding them towards, if not specific people, populations of people that they should consider as possibly being individuals or groups of people that could be involved in that sort of activity. It is truly a dark science, not something that I ever did when I was in the Bureau, but I have great respect for the men and women who do that every day. I would expect that those same sort of assets are being utilized to try to figure out who was behind the 2 bombs left on Capitol Hill on January 6th. That's a crime that continues to be unsolved, and one that causes great concern in law enforcement for many of the same reasons that we saw in the Unabomber investigation, right? These folks who are inclined to lash out with bombs that are either placed or sent through the mail, they often start out in rudimentary ways, but their proficiency in technology develops over time. They very rarely ever just stop.
This guy's peak federal agent phenotype, yes. He is. That is true. Looks like he straight up looks like the classic Mormon federal agent guy. Fed skull. It's very different. It's like if you put lawyer skull with cop skull together and just like smashed it into one another, you get a very unique morph. He was one? Yeah, I know.
In these sorts of bombing campaigns, they very frequently come back to them time and time again. So that is a case that I'm sure is taking a lot of FBI attention right now.
And is among the pattern of events, is it the case that over time there develops this sort of bravado and almost like a yearning for attention without being identified, to be praised, that they continue to be so mysterious, and then suddenly a mistake is made, like in the case of this manifesto, it ended up backfiring, whereas he may have felt like he wanted to elaborate on motivation. That, in the end, is how they ended up getting him, in part.
It's very true. Many of these long, extended investigations over so-called cold cases with repeat offenders, they develop almost a sort of dialogue with the investigators through their criminal acts. They want to kind of maintain the attention of the investigators. They want to constantly kind of outdo themselves. It's a real catch-22 for law enforcement and for investigators. Every time they reach out through making contact or communications or engage in another criminal act, you have the opportunity of developing the clue or the investigative lead that could lead you to their apprehension. But of course, every time they do that, the public is also at great risk. So there's immense pressure on the investigators to bring that back and forth, to bring that criminal activity to a halt before additional folks are injured or killed.
So still unclear the cause of death, but he was 81. He apparently was moved recently within the past year from a facility in Colorado, federal facility in Colorado, to North Carolina for health reasons. How important will it be to publicly reveal the ultimate cause of death?
I think it's always important for the government to be transparent about what happens in the detention facilities. Just, to my understanding, there's no reason to believe, from what little we know about this situation, that there's anything untoward involved here.
I mean, he was like, what is he, like 84 years old? Yeah, I feel like, come on. Is it 81 or 84? Oh, it's 81 on the fucking screen right there. Yeah, I think it makes sense when you're 81 years old and you die. It's not like, wow, this guy sure had an untimely demise, that he had some secrets and the government came after him. Just like nothing happened to Epstein in prison, Jeffrey Epstein literally did have secrets and also wasn't old and had already gone to prison and did not kill himself at all. Making a comparison between Jeffrey Epstein, who we still have not found what kind of blackmail tapes he had in his facility. The Manhattan DA will probably never reveal that shit. Who was connected to like literally all of the world's powerful, wealthy individuals who died under incredibly suspicious circumstances. And the footage was mysteriously deleted. The security camera footage was mysteriously deleted from his cell block. Comparing that to like a dude who's been in prison for fucking 30 years, who was just like some random fucking kook who died of old age, is a little crazy.
He's obviously exhibited some sort of health problems in the recent past. He was moved to the facility in North Carolina. Likely Butner, the federal prison hospital in Butner, North Carolina, is a place where many federal prisoners end up who have significant health issues. Bernie Madoff, I believe, was at Butner when he passed as well. So I think it's very important for transparency reasons to fully understand the circumstances around the death, but I would caution speculation at this point. We don't really have any reason to believe anything untoward happened here just yet.
Hey, you typed Kaczynski wrong. I don't care. I don't care. I feel like we've covered Kaczynski enough.